Alright, so this is just a quick walkthrough of everything you see here with this sample AP free response question from the microeconomics free response questions in a previous year. This question deals with 3 different interrelated goods. So when we see interrelated goods, we're talking about complements and substitutes typically. In this case, we've got the markets for bananas, muffins, and coffee. And each market is considered to be perfectly competitive, which is going to help kind of inform some of our assumptions that we're going to draw. Specifically, perfectly competitive markets are typically characterized by the initial supply and demand equilibrium, and that dictating the market price and quantity in the absence of any kind of intervention or other market failure. So A is asking, in the market for bananas, the equilibrium price is $1 per pound and the equilibrium quantity is 1,000 pounds per week. Suppose the government imposes a price floor on bananas at $1.20 per pound, causing the quantity to increase to 1,500 pounds per week. So we initially start out with a supply and demand equilibrium represented here, and we've labeled 1,000 pounds per week and $1 per pound. For part 1, it's asking, would the price floor, which we've drawn in at $1.20, impose or result in a shortage, surplus, or neither? So with the $1.20 price floor, we just are going to draw this flat line at $1.20. That's what it told us it's going to be. And we're going to say this is the lowest the price is allowed to go. So the equilibrium price was previously lower than that, but now it's not going to be able to get as low as it wants to meet that equilibrium. So when we move to the right, starting at the axis where $1.20 is marked, we move to the right and we run into the demand curve at this point here, QD. QD isn't given to us as a specific number, so we don't know, but we can label it QD. And then if we go back up to our price line, our price floor line at $1.20, and continue moving to the right, we hit the supply curve eventually, and then we can shoot straight down, mark that QS, and that was given at 1,500 pounds per week. So QS would be 1,500 pounds. But the key takeaway here is that we hit the demand curve before we hit the supply curve. In other words, we ran out of people in line demanding the product before we ran out of supply on the shelf of this product to sell. So that's going to mean we have a surplus of product left over on the shelf. For part 2, it's asking, calculate the price elasticity of supply if the price increases from $1 to $1.20. And to calculate price elasticity of supply, we're going to always need 4 factors. We need price 1, quantity 1, price 2, and quantity 2. So if we don't have 2 prices and 2 quantities, and it's asking to calculate elasticity, check and see if not enough information is one of the choices. I've seen that become more and more common where you're asked to calculate elasticity and you're given a few choices, but the question itself does not give you enough information to calculate elasticity, and so you're just supposed to select that there's not enough information. Here we're given 2 prices, $1 and $1.20, and we're given 2 quantities, 1,000 and 1,500. And those are all actually given directly in the setup, part A. So we use our midpoint formula to find the percent change in quantity supplied over the percent change in price, and we end up with 500 change in quantity supplied over 1,250 as the average quantity supplied. All of that divided by 20 cents, which is the change in price, over $1.10, which is the average price. And we get 40% over 18.2%, which works out to be 2.2 as an elasticity coefficient. So we would say the price elasticity of supply for bananas when we change the price from $1 to $1.20 per pound is 2.2, meaning every 1% increase in price will lead to a 2.2% increase in quantity supplied. And since that coefficient of 2.2 is larger than 1, we would say that it is supply elastic. Moving on to part B, if bananas are an input for our muffins, then the price of bananas is going to determine how much it costs to produce and sell muffins. So if the price of bananas goes up, then the cost of supplying muffins goes up, and that's represented by a left shift of the supply curve. So we've got our graph for the muffin market here, starting out with an initial equilibrium, price 0, quantity 0, and then we shift our supply to reflect the increase in banana costs, and we end up with price 1, quantity 1, which is a higher price but a lower quantity. And then for part 3, you would want to shade it all on the same graph, but I broke it out just so it's a little bit easier to see and less clutter on the same graph. But the shaded portion here is just the area between price 0 and price 1 from the axis to the demand curve. And then finally for C, in the market for coffee, the equilibrium price is $3 per cup, and the equilibrium quantity is 100 cups per week. The cross price elasticity of coffee with respect to muffins is -2. So this tells us, as a elasticity coefficient turned into a fraction, that we would be writing it as -2 over 1, or for every 1% the price increases, we decrease the quantity by 2%. So with 1, it says are coffee and muffins normal goods, inferior goods, complementary goods, or substitute goods. And we talked about how normal goods and inferior goods are going to require us knowing information about the income and the income of the consumers changing over that time period. So kind of like we just said with price elasticity needing 2 prices and 2 quantities, income elasticity, which is what we would use to determine if a good is normal or inferior, we're going to need 2 incomes and 2 quantities. So they're not normal or inferior. We're looking at whether they're complementary or substitutes. Since the cross-price elasticity is a negative relationship, in other words, increasing the price of one good decreases the sales of another, that means we were planning on buying them together. So they were complementary goods, we would be buying them together, and the increase in price of one caused us to want to buy less of both goods then as a result. If we assume that the supply of coffee is perfectly elastic, that's giving us this flat line of supply at $3, and we use the equilibrium price and quantity given above. So we're going to say that the demand that exists must be intersecting that flat line of elastic supply at exactly 100 units. And now the impact of an increase in the price of muffins on the coffee market causes us to demand less coffee, because going to the coffee shop and having coffee and a muffin is now a more expensive experience. And then given the original quantity of 100 cups of coffee per week, if there's an increase in the price of muffins of 10%, what is the new equilibrium quantity in the coffee market? So in this case, we have a cross price elasticity of -2. So for every 1% we do increase the price, we're losing 2% of our coffee sold. So when we continue increasing the price by 1% 10 times until we get to 10% higher prices, we end up with 10 times the amount of loss in quantity sold. So that's 10 times -2, or a -20%, or a 20% decrease in sales. So we go from 100% or 100 units sold down to 80 units.